Hey guys, my name is John Park, and welcome to the first chapter of this tutorial series. In this demonstration, I wanted to show and talk about edges. And I know some of you guys may be familiar with edges, but for those of you who are new, that's going to be kind of the theme for today's topic, is how to control and make really great edge decision making. So I wanted to go ahead and kind of show you guys the process. I'm going to start off by giving our background here just a quick wash, and this is just to kind of get some of the warmth in our scene here. And I'm only going to do half the palette so you guys can understand the types of tools I'm using. When I do my washes, I typically use a very kind of soft bristle brush texture, kind of like this. Okay, and that's kind of the tool that's been like my go-to tool for to create like this painterly effect for the background. So I'm gonna go ahead and label this background, and I'm gonna start blocking in just my my ground plane here. I'm gonna go ahead and make a copy here, and I typically like to just kind of tone the overall value or the overall ground plane with kind of like a greenish value that's going to represent, you know, maybe some grassy plain or something like that. You know, it's up to you, like how you want to set up your composition, but I always like to kind of switch it up, add a little bit of green, and then add some textural brushes here. And this one is this brush, which I like to call, I titled this one Painter Dynamic, and it gives you really nice little brush strokes there. So that's kind of what I'm using here. Okay, you're gonna get kind of this stepping. If you ever get this stepping here, and if you don't like it, you can turn off the color dynamics mode, or you can go ahead and just pick one that doesn't have it, which is right underneath it. It's much more of a flat, simple brush, and that's kind of what I'm using to kind of lay down the foundation, or the ground plane at least, for this. And then I'm going to quickly move into the background here, and I'm going to go ahead and just kind of darken the background. I'm going to add just some tree effect, you know, maybe just paint the impression of a tree or something. And do keep in mind, like a lot of what I'm getting my inspiration from is from Richard Schmid. You know, I look at his paintings a lot, and oftentimes I'll actually even refer to his books and just kind of the lesson plans and things that he's talked about in his books. So really great source. If you haven't checked it out, be sure to check out Richard Schmid, his Alla Prima book. It's a really great source for this kind of stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of lay in just an impression of a background, impression of trees or something like that. And then from there, you know, I'm going to start thinking about kind of the general foundation or the general structure of our house drawing. So in order for me to just do that, I can go and paint in, or if you want, you can actually go and just do a quick sketch to represent a house or a barn. Entirely up to you. Okay, I always like to kind of just kind of go in and start sculpting the shapes, but if you're kind of a little unsure of your shapes or how you want to construct the drawing or the house, go ahead and do a little sketch here before going into the actual painting, and then from here you can actually just start to block in the shapes. And I like to just kind of think about it very simple shapes, you know, not thinking about any values just yet. I'm just thinking about just the overall shape of the house, and the edges and all that stuff we're going to worry about a little later, but I just want to make sure I get all of these nice little colors down before we worry about all that other stuff. Okay, and maybe for the roof, Maybe just something a little bit cooler in tone. The way I'm selecting my color is I'm actually just looking at a photograph of a barn, and I have a bunch of Richard Schmid references up on my book here. It's really hard to kind of get good references of his paintings online. I've found some, but they're relatively low res, so I always kind of refer to my book here. But what you want to do is you mainly want to just focus in on getting just all those colors, you know? Just try to establish the color before worrying about textures and lost edges and all that stuff, you know? I just want to make sure that we're satisfied with the general color scheme of our painting here. And then from here I can start to think about just the basic planes of what we have in terms of shadow and light. So our building is kind of in this fashion, where we have a little bit of light hitting the sides here, and then this is all going to be relatively in shadow. Let's go ahead and use our brush. And also, I haven't really done much soft edges yet, so everything is just kind of very blocky and just kind of, I guess, very stiff. You know what I mean? Like there's no real life to the actual painting just yet, and I'm just kind of adding in the colors. Based on what I see here in the photograph, and just using a little bit of my own imagination for the composition here. Maybe a little roof, and let's go ahead and I want to add like a little bit here. So now once we're up to a certain point where you feel relatively good about kind of the information, you know, like we have like the barn, you have the house, you have like all these things starting to kind of be established here. This is where we can start thinking about edges and how do you make this stuff look or appear to be painterly, right? That's kind of the goal here is we have the tools in Photoshop, we have the brushes, but how do you appear to make things look as if they're very, very, you know, impressionistic and painterly? Let me just go ahead and add in a few more windows here. First off, I mean, a lot of it, the brush I'm using does quite a bit of the work here. And you know, I'm actually using this brush, and it's on rotation. That's kind of why you're seeing a lot of this stuff kind of swivel around, you know, when I add my marks and my colors here. But let's just say we have like a tree here, and you can sketch it in as best as you can. And we have a big tree here, obviously. You know, even if you did sketch it in or you used a shape, and sometimes I like to kind of go back and forth and use either a shape to help me establish a tree, or I'll use even like a brush. But let's say we have something like this, right? Because we are using Photoshop, let's say I have like this tree here. There's a lot of information on that tree, right? I mean, just like painting, just like Photoshop, I mean, you're gonna put in all your information, and then what we can do is we can basically make it impressionistic by getting rid of just some of these edges, and we just want the impression of the shape. Okay, because I don't want the attention to be at the trees, I'm gonna go ahead and just lose some of these edges here. Okay, I definitely want my focus to be mainly at our house here. This is gonna be our focal point. I'm gonna go ahead and just kind of glaze the background just a little bit, just so it doesn't seem so stark and so just brown and random. I'm just gonna add a little bit of green texture in the background here. Okay, let's go ahead and compress these two, and I'm gonna go to my smudge tool, and I'm gonna show you guys how I'm gonna control some of these edges. Now, the way edges work on a painting is that you're going to have something that's defined. This is really defined, and our eye is going to travel here, and this here is where it gets loose. This is a lost edge, right? So what I want is I want an opportunity to have a lost edge here and maybe over here. So how I'm going to do that is I'm actually going to use my smudge brush, and I'm going to go ahead and just kind of disrupt the edges. And that's kind of what I'm doing here, is I'm actually disrupting the edges. And I'm going to go back on top with my brush, just kind of define it a little bit more. And anything that I want to define, I'm going to have a clear edge. Anything that I don't, where I want to lose an edge, I'm going to actually blend it with the same value, or I'm going to basically disrupt the edge, so it kind of becomes very, very lost like this. Okay, you can do that in many ways. We can have a lost edge down here with some of the trees and things like that. I'm going to be bringing a little bit more color into the grass, and I'm using this is the stamp tool, and I like to use this to kind of overlay, to bring a little bit of color and greenery into our scene, because a lot of the colors that I chose here are relatively flat, and obviously traditional media, you're going to get a lot more variation, really, really nice colors and really nice range. So I'm going to do this here, but notice if anything's way too strong, I'm going to use my smudge tool to kind of smudge this so it's a little bit more impressionistic and very, very loose just in this area, because you don't want to create too much attention. Even here, if I have shadows on the underside of this tree, I want to make sure I create those shadows, but then I'm going to smudge some areas just to kind of loosen it up so it's not so strong. I don't know what this is. This is maybe like some sort of little water tower or some sort of structure back here. And here, like on the trees, I'm just going to go ahead and kind of blend it into the background just by painting. And I only want to define some of the edges here. So if you have a really distinct tree shape, say it's kind of more round, I'm going to go ahead and add that shape, make it distinct. And areas where I want to lose that edge, I'm going to go ahead and blend out or paint so that it kind of blends in with the background. So we get a nice painterly effect. Now if we have something like this where you see how this rooftop here is very, very undefined, if you want to define it with an edge, this is where you're going to basically pick the color, this tone here, and you're going to define that edge with a very distinct shape, just so there's a nice separation, you know? And this is where you want to make sure that the separation is really, really And you can already see just by doing that, we're getting a really nice, relatively defined or very clear edge, right? Obviously you can do this more meticulously than I am doing it here, and just kind of locking in that shape. And a lot of times it's kind of nice to create variation of color, because you don't want things to be just blue, right? You can actually create some other tones in here. And this is where I'll kind of go back and forth and use my my pattern stamp tool to add just a little bit more color here to add that vibrancy. And obviously, you know, when I look at paintings like Richard Schmid or Mark Bodges, he's another great painter. They have such great color ranges within their painting that give it so much character and so much to look at. There's a lot of variety. And you'll see right here, this right here was not a clear defined edge, so I'm going to go ahead and define that edge there. Okay. Anytime something's too strong, like if this is too strong, I'm going to go ahead and lose that edge. You know, just kind of smudge it to lose the edge. Or if this is too strong, let's go ahead and lose that edge. And it becomes very impressionistic and just more of a, you know, kind of like, oh, that's just a bush, or, you know, and it kind of becomes more of that shape when we do that. Let me go ahead and add just a little bit of texture here using my texture 013, and it just kind of adds a little bit of tooth. And sometimes you only want to add maybe 1 or 2 brush strokes. You don't want to overdo it. Anytime you're adding multiple brush strokes, it starts to get overworked. So that's something that's going to take just a little bit of time, you know, to get more and more efficient at your brush strokes. But the most important thing that I do find in this exercise is really just understanding how to create nice, clear edges. Go ahead and add just some more architectural details, since it's a relatively simple, pretty simple painting, a simple house shape. Again, I'm just going to add just more information, like, you know, some grass here, so it kind of has a nice variation of color. But notice this right here. Notice before I had a really clear edge, but notice what I did here. By adding a closer value here, our eye made this into a soft edge. So now this is a really simple soft edge. And that's kind of what I wanted. Add a little bit of darker value so I can kind of define the bottom of this tree trunk here. And sometimes if you want to bring back a little bit more clarity or more shape to your paintings, you can do this. But notice what happens when I do this, and if I add a tree trunk, look at how it becomes very clear. It becomes a strong edge, right? So that's kind of the opportunity of, that's kind of where you can create opportunities to have really clear and strong edges, to have a nice defined area for a tree trunk. But if you don't care and you kind of want it to be relatively loose and a little bit more impressionistic, you can just kind of leave it at that and just let the eye just make up the details there. I'm gonna go ahead and soften up this sky here, and you can see it's coming together relatively quickly, right? I'm gonna add a little bit of color variation by using my pattern stamp, just to give a little bit much more of a stronger green palette here. And anytime something's too strong, I'm gonna use my smudge tool to kind of smudge and give a little bit more edge variation. You see? So it feels less stiff. Definitely feels less digital. Use my smudge tool to kind of give that a lost edge. And using trees against like a house really gives it a nice framing device. It's pretty powerful, you know, if you use it right in the appropriate places. Go ahead and add just a little bit more definition here. And you know, we definitely have a tree here, so I'm gonna add just a shadow of that tree on this part of the house. I don't know if that's too distracting, then I can scoot over the shadows. I can add it here. And you can have like little tiny details like a picket fence or all these things. So you can see how quickly it becomes very, very realized and detailed. You know, there's like this perceived detail. I do want to talk about a little bit more simply how you can understand the concept of edges by showing you just a simple demonstration that I learned from watching the Richard Schmid DVD, and I thought it was a very effective concept. I'm gonna go over that just in 1 second. Lose some edges there, and then again, anytime I want to lose an edge, I just kind of smudge or make sure that the value relationship is relatively close, so our eye knows exactly where to lose that edge. Especially even here, like if I want, I can have this tree lose an edge just by having the values transition out. Okay, so there you have the basic idea. Now I'm using this entire set. I'm going to give you guys this brush set. There's a lot of great tools in this. There's really nice brushes and things that you can definitely play around with here. But the basic idea of edges is if we have an object, say this was the demo that I saw, was if you have like an orange or an apple or something, right? You have this basic concept or this basic idea of a fruit as round, and you have a background. You can start to define the edge by cutting into it like this. Okay? Now this becomes a really hard edge, as you can see. Right? Hard edge as in it's very defined all around. Where you want to create transitions is areas where you want to lose the edge, and that can either be done by smudging like this, which what I was showing you guys, or it can be done by transitioning the values through. So you can actually transition this value by going a lot more darker and cooler in temperature. And by doing this, you're gonna have a nice transition here of this object, going from a hard edge here, which is on this side. This is a really defined hard edge, to something that's very soft edge that's happening just purely through values. Okay, so that's something that I would like you guys to just think about in terms of edges. So you can do it by value, or you can do it by disrupting the clarity of an edge like that. Okay, so I oftentimes will kind of use both principles to be able to control where I want a defined edge versus a undefined edge. Okay. And let's go ahead and make this I don't know if this is like an apple or something, but that's kind of the idea. Is it's more important about the principle of this thing. So that's going to be the basic concept, and I'm going to show you guys how we're going to use a Schmid or another painting of your choice that has really nice brush strokes, and how we're going to study it. I'm going to show you guys kind of how I'm going to approach it, and it's not, again, it's a very simple method, and it's more about focusing on edges than anything. So I'm going to be not inventing my own colors or anything like that. That's definitely not the purpose for this demo, but the purpose is having really good brush work and creating that painterly kind of aesthetic. So that's going to be the goal for this demo here, and yeah, I hope you guys enjoy, and let's go ahead and get started. Hey guys, so I just want to show you guys kind of the process of creating textures when I'm using the pattern stamp tool. So what the pattern stamp tool is, basically it's underneath the clone stamp, and all you do is you hold it down, and it will actually come with very default settings here. And you'll notice I'll actually choose a brush here, and as you paint, you will see that it emulates, or it paints literally what's in this sampling right here. And now there's different modes. You can actually align the textures so that whatever you paint, it will basically be revealing basically what the textures are doing. Or you can put it on impressionist mode, and it'll sample the colors, and it'll give you kind of this craziness, right? So this is something that I use, and what I like to do is I always like to use my own textures. I'm going to bring up a little set here so you guys can see. And I like to import textures that I found, either things online that's ambiguous enough, or things that I've made or I've scanned in. And I like using various textures for various reasons, because it gives you so much variety of shapes, color, and just grittiness. So this is something that I love to have you guys just try out, and I like to just create a bunch of textures in here and just kind of bring them in. And some of it can be really low res, it can be really high res, it doesn't really matter. It's just as long as the texture is cool and it works for you. And a lot of times, if you have things like, you know, text here, you can always kind of blend it out. But what's great about this is that I can now import this into my pattern stamp mode. So the way you do that is you go into the layer, you go into edit, and you go define pattern. It's going to ask you to name the pattern. You can call it like green, and let's go ahead and do another one. Define pattern, brown, and let's do another one right here. Define pattern, and we'll call this one blue. Okay, so we have 3 different distinct patterns that we've kind of imported here. And I'm going to go to my pattern stamp here, and you'll notice that there's 3 basically thumbnails that popped up here, and I'm literally painting with this. Now if you take it out of Impressions Notes and paint, notice how I'm painting literally the pattern that I imported. This is just a lazy man's tool of importing patterns without having to drag it into your scene, but it's great to paint just to get a little bit of color and just some variety, especially when you're drawing and you're painting, as you've seen in my previous demos where we have an object here or a character of some sort and you want to import the pattern. A great way to kind of get some color, some variety, and just instant textures. So this is a great little tool that I've been utilizing in all the demos, and yeah, I hope you enjoyed the rest of the demo. Thanks.